Hello and welcome to another one of my how-to videos for Farming Simulator 19, FS19. In this video I'm going to go into a little bit about what you should do and also possibly what you shouldn't do when you work with Seaons. If you haven't watched my introduction video to Seaons yet, then I suggest you should go and do it, because I'm going to give you a much more overview of what Seaons is and what Seaons isn't, and what you should be aware of, and well, obviously what you shouldn't be aware of, but more general introduction to what Seaons is and what you should do with Seaons if you want to use it. So I might say some things on this video here that won't make that much sense to you if you haven't watched that video yet, so please do that. Other than that, this video is going to be not about hay, even though I'm picking up hay right now. If you notice that I'm driving quite insane right now, actually, it is first and foremost because I'm using my gamepad and not my steering wheel, but also since I've been alt-tapped out of the game. For some reason, it resets the steering wheel or the gamepad, so there are only two options when you drive around. You can turn hard left or hard right, and that's it. Nothing else. Let's see. And also I have a problem that I cannot remember all the keys that I use yet. On that, and haven't set it up probably yet also. So yeah, I'm going to do that. And there was some hay, yeah, that's right. Let's see if I can squeeze it in here. Like that. And then we're going to, I'm going to finish this hay work here, and picking up this hay. And then we're going to talk about how you should do with your crops and how you should plant them and how you shouldn't plant them. But let me just finish this and then I'll get back to you. Alright, welcome back. I just collected the hay, and I also reset Seaons once again because I thought we had to start on a fresh day. So this is 7:14 in the morning and the first day on early spring. Also, let's go into the Seaons menu. I have set so that we have 6 days Seaons. That means that we only have to wait 2 days for every transition, and that means that I have to fast forward through less time, and you have to wait less time for something to happen. So the idea here is to try to test out some things. So I'm going to sow some wheat, some barley, some cotton. I think I should be able to sow cotton with this plant I have here, and then some corn. I'm going to do it in small patches, so I'm not going to sow an entire field, just to see how Seaons actually handle different sowing mechanisms or gaming mechanisms. So the idea should be that since for wheat and barley, and I'm going to do it with wheat, we are in the correct planting season, and the temperature is also, the ground temperature is also warm enough, we should be able to make wheat germinate in the soil. Because cotton is way out of planting season, you can see we should wait all the way to late spring in order to plant cotton. And also the ground temperature is way too cold for cotton to germinate. This should fail. And finally, the same goes with corn, but there's only one transition for the correct planting season. So we're going to see whether the corn is going to germinate anyway. I think actually we're also going to put in some soybeans also, just to see whether it is fixed or it is randomized, whether something will germinate even if you plant it outside of seasons. So out of season. So let's get going. I have my tractor ready here with the planter on. So let's do it. Wheat, yes. Let's start it up and lower it. Also, of course, when we're talking about planting and talking about crops, we also need to touch a little bit the rotation cycle that you can do. But the problem is that I cannot show you an entire rotation cycle simply oh, I didn't want to fold it. I just wanted to turn it off. So let's see, what was the next one? Cotton. Let's see if I can choose cotton. No, also radish, corn, sunflower, soybeans. Cotton, yes. So let's go back to the start and sow some cotton. No. Now, I cannot show you an entire rotation cycle because that takes many harvests. But the idea is, I might be able to show you that on the map. The idea is that if you plant something in succession of something else, for example, one plant that start, yeah. The idea is that different plants use different nutrients in the soil. So if you're going to plant, for example, wheat all year long, all the time, the wheat is going to use all of those nutrients, those same nutrients, and they're going to drain the ground, the soil for that. Let's just see. Soybeans. So when you plant different crops in a rotation cycle, those crops that you plant in the next cycle will use different nutrients and will most likely also return some nutrients that the former crops used. So when rotating your crops in your planting cycle, you will always keep your ground filled with the correct nutrients, and hence you don't have to fertilize as much. Now, the rotation cycle is a bonus. It's not a demand. You can plant wheat all the time if you want to have wheat and nothing else. You will just have to fertilize your soil all 3 times because you're going to use those nutrients. So it's kind of like in the vanilla game, the way you can use corn, right? Yeah. It's kind of like in the vanilla game where you can use oilseed radish as sort of a, instead of fertilizing with fertilizer or slurry or something like that, you can plant oilseed radish and then plow it over, and then you have one fertilizer stage. I might be able to show you on the map, how those, you actually get a bonus for planting something and then planting something else. See, corn, yeah. But let's just finish this patch here. I don't think there's anything else we need to plant because we have all the different types planted right now. That should be it. We can just run over once and see what we got. But we should have all the things right now planted in order to test this. Alright, so let's go check. So here we have corn. Here we have soybeans. Here we have cotton. And here we have wheat. Now notice all of those say planted. So this is the very first stage that you have on your screen when you have planted something, and it is also present on the map. As you can see here, if I go into growth and go to my map, you can see here all these different, this is one big square because they're different crops, right? So we have one with wheat, one with cotton, one with soybeans, and one with corn. Now, when I advance time, one of two things can happen. And what the idea is with seasons, the way it is explained and should work, is that the wheat over here, we will get growing. So it will be light green. For all the rest, because I've planted them outside of the planting season and also in soil that is too cold, we should get germination failed. But like I said, I don't think that the manual is very precise whether it is a probability, a risk, or it is fixed. So in a fixed scenario, every time you plant something outside of planting season, germination will fail. In a probability scenario, it will be so that if you plant something, there's a certain amount of probability that the germination will fail. So, for instance, if you plant something outside of season, a planting season, and also plant it outside of the correct soil temperature, there's a certain chance that your seeds will survive anyway, and you can then get crops despite the fact that you planted them outside of season. But we're going to test that right here and see what happens. But as far as I have understood seasons, like I said, the only thing that should germinate and give us some crops is wheat. The rest we should get germination failed as the result. But let's take a look. Oh yes, there was something else, yes. So let's go into soil composition. As you can see here, I have actually planted one time, but it didn't give the it didn't give the result that I wanted. The thing is that I changed the season length mid-while in fast forwarding the time, and that might have skewed my results because, well, as you can probably imagine, seasons cannot figure out exactly when I planted the crops, and if I changed the season length from 9 days to 3 days, so as you can see, there's only 1 day playroom, and that means that if I planted something just on the brink to the next cycle, I didn't plant cotton, which has two transitions in order for it to get to. Let me show you. In the last test I did, I planted wheat, planted barley, I planted soybeans, and I planted corn. Now, as you can see, I have a 6-day season length right now, which means that the first early spring here transition takes 2 days. If I have changed that in here to 3 days instead, that whole step here, that first stage, would only be 1 day. And if I were on the end of that day, seasons might have thought that I have planted it within this within the planting seasons, and like I didn't expect, it did give me germination for the crops. But that is definitely not the case for cotton, because there are 2 stages. So even if it didn't think that I planted it on this day, but this day instead, there would still be 1 whole day, 1 whole transition before I get to the planting seasons. But we're going to see what happened. It might be probability based, and that will mean that we might get results one way or the other. And that is going to be a bit interesting to see, because the germination considerations for soybeans and corn are the same. So if, for example, soybeans come up, corn don't, well, then it might be that it is probability based. And I think it is, because we have this here as well. So we have frost resistance and drought resistance. But, well, like I said, there's nothing to do but to test it. But as you can see here, the idea of the rotation cycle here, I have planted different crops here and then plowed it over. Now I've planted something else here and plowed it over. And the seeder that I used, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't have the ability to fertilize my soil while I seed. So the only explanation for these two, you can see the first part of the field here is in its first fertilized step. This part here is in its second fertilized step, and this here is in the third fertilized step. So this is just because I have planted something and then plowed it over and then planted it again. It also seems, now we're at it, that Seasons 19 isn't that interested in whether you actually harvested your crops or not. It only seems that it considers something has been planted and then plowed over or cultivated, and then something else has been planted. And if that is in some ways within the rotation cycles here, the numbers you get out here is sort of points. If you get 1 or above, I think you get a fertilized bonus. If it's less, you don't. But like I said, this is going to be something that we have to test along the way because, well, the documentation isn't that precise on that matter. But I'm going to fast forward time now. And while I do that and stand here and look at what happens, I'm also going to fast forward the video in itself so that you don't have to wait the same amount of time that I have. So see you in early summer. Welcome to early summer. As you can see, like I said, the wheat has grown, has matured. It is not ready to be harvested yet, but it is there. The cotton is determined as planted, and if we go into the map, we should see that they are still defined as planted. So not germination failed, but they're still defined as planted, even though we are well within the planting season for cotton. So they're still defined as planted. And whether that is a bug in Seasons or it is simply the way it's meant to be, I'm not sure about that. I have to investigate that. But then we have, and that's the interesting thing, soybeans are growing, so they did germinate, and the corn is growing, So they did also germinate, even though we planted them outside of season. As you can see, interestingly enough, they have different growth rates. So this is almost in its final stage, ready to be, in the next stage, is going to be ready to be harvested. This is still defined as planted, so I should think it should go as germination failed. And if we look at the entire map, there doesn't seem to be any one of those that are defined as germination failed. But the interesting thing is that even though we planted the corn and the soybeans at the same time, almost at the same time, they are at different growth stages. So I think this is maybe something that I want to report to the team behind them, that if you plant corn, soybeans outside of season, that is outside of the planting season, in early spring, you can still get them to germinate. And if you plant something like cotton, which is definitely outside of planting season, it is still defined as planted and isn't defined as germination failed. I'm not sure how it's supposed to go. As far as I understand Seasons 19, it should be changed to germination failed. There are also some other things that I wanted to show you. Now, in vanilla Minecraft, in vanilla FS19, when you plant something and then you wait some time and you spray it, then you will get weeds all over the place. They will just pop up like normal crops, but then you have to spray them over or run them over with a weeder in order to remove them. When you activate seasons, something different is going to happen, and you can see this on this map here. As you can see, there are weeds still, but they are in patches all around the field. So there are small patches of weeds. We can, for example, go up here. We have a patch of weeds, and that means that you can take your weeder. I'm not sure if, let me see if, what is this? Liquid fertilizer. Yeah, let's just empty it here and go down and get some weeder. Obviously, I have just sowed this little patch here, so in this case, the weeds, they aren't that important. But when you have seeded an entire field, obviously you would like it for it to be weed free. And so, let me just see, where did I... Oh yeah, I put them up here. So you have to... Now I have read in the menu, in the documentation for Seasons 19, that you should be able to preemptively spray your fields with herbicide, but I haven't figured out yet how exactly you're going to do that, because I haven't figured out how to see on the map, make it to recognize whether you have sprayed it or not. So that's a bit of a problem. Let me just show you how you're going to do this. It is basically the same as in the vanilla game. The only difference is that you only have to deal with these small patches around the field. So I'm just going to spray over this little part here and then show you that it is going to be removed. And also that little patch up in front. It started? No, sorry. There we go. And the texture you can see for the weeds, they change just like in the vanilla game. They are simply incredibly fast dead. Like that. And let's take these as well. Now we're at it. Then. And that. Alright, so that is how you deal with weeds. Just like in the vanilla game, the only difference is that you don't get an entire field filled with weeds. You get them in small patches. Now, we haven't seen that on this field, on these small stripes that I've made here with the planted fields. But with planted crops. But one of the things that you might notice if you, for example, get drought or frost is that parts, again, some of these small patches, so small patches of your sowed field, your growing field, will fail to germinate. I'm not sure whether this is a patch. It might be. I'm not sure. It looks a bit like it, but it might not also not be it. Let's take a look. It doesn't seem it, but it's very hard to see here. If you, it would be something like this. You can see I have small patches here that are withered. Then you would have sort of like these small patches here with yeah, there are none of the fields that look like that. But nevertheless, you would get small stripes and patches like these in your fields where they are dead. That simply to say. Now, there are of course other things that you need to consider when you're playing Seaons and FS19 when you how you handle your fields, but those things are basically the same as in the vanilla game. You have to plow your fields at some point, you have to cultivate your fields at some point, you have to spray them and all those things. Now, there are many ways you can, and obviously I'm not going to show you that here because I think it goes with the territory that those are mandatory. Those are not a separate, distinct part of Seasons that is a part of the game. So whether you play vanilla or you play with Seasons, it is the same. You're going to have to deal with that. There are of course different strategies that you can use. I would start by spraying either manure, digestate or slurry on the fields. Then I will run them over by either a plow or cultivator, a disc harrow, depending on if it's a small or a big farm. I might even do on the small farms, just keep the subsoiler and don't use cultivators at all because, well, the subsoiler is both a plow and a cultivator in one tool, so it will do both. Then I will usually, at that point, seed my fields. So depending whether I want to plant or seed, then that's what I'm going to do. Then I will almost always run over my fields with a fertilizer of some sort. And for Seasons, that is the place, that is the point where you cannot do anything on your fields until the next growth stage. That is at least my experience. Like I said, I haven't figured out a way to differentiate when my fields have accepted the herbicides. So for instance, if you have watched one of my other videos on this farm here, also on Midwest Horizon. No, actually it is Michigan farm. You will see that I found out that you can run over your fields with a fertilizer before you sow them. So you plow them, subsoil them, cultivate them, whatever you want to do. Then you can run them over at that point with a fertilizer. Then you can seed, preferably with a seeder that can fertilize as well. Then you have a fertilized field now. Then you can run over your fields, this fertilized field, in the second time fertilized with a herbicide. And then finally you can run it over again with a fertilizer. And you can see that it works by the fact that when you run over your fields with a fertilizer, it tends to grow darker. You can even see it here. This is a light brown shade, and this is the darker brown shade. You can see the line right here. So it is also present in Seasons, but it seems to me that it works in a bit different way. So you have to do something on your fields before it works. For instance, here I ran over with this cultivator right here. And as you can see, I haven't run it over here. And also you should be able to see, you can see here that some of the parts are fertilized more than others. Yeah. So that's one of the ways that you can see it, and a small patch of weeds. That's one way you can see it, and that's one way to do it. It doesn't seem that this method works when you are doing with Seasons, but then again, it's not really a problem. The reason I did it that way in vanilla game is I thought it was completely random when I would get a transition in stage and when I would not. In Seasons, you will only get transitions in stage, growth stage, when you go through a transition in season stage. So that is the way you can figure out how much time you have. So for instance, when you have planted, let's just say wheat, if you get, no, let's say barley, because then it's more easier to distinguish the two words. So if you plant barley here in the early spring, is in Seasons the time I use to plow or cultivate my fields. Now, if I do as they suggest, I'm not sure where it said it, I think it's somewhere in the intro, they suggest that you set your time scale to 5 times and then use the 9-day season length. In that way, at least that's the way they suggest it, you will use the first part of spring to cultivate or plow your fields. Then you will use the mid part of spring to seed your fields and then perhaps spray them a bit. And then you will use the final parts of spring to also fertilize and spray your fields with herbicide and all those things that you need to do. And then you will be ready to harvest in early or midsummer, depending on, well, if you seed it in mid-spring, you will also first be able to harvest your fields, as far as I know it, in mid-spring. It takes 4 steps. Now, some of them takes 5 steps. That's a bit hard to see. But the thing is that you will be able to harvest them here. Then you can use, again, late summer to early spring to cultivate or plow your fields again, depending on what you want to plant. And that's, again, goes into the rotation cycle. But let's just say you wanted to plant barley again. Then after you have harvested your fields here in midsummer, you can plow them or cultivate them in late summer. And then you can plant in early autumn. And then you would have to spray and all those things in mid and late autumn and wait through winter, because you will not be able to do anything here. I'm not even sure you would be able to spray, probably not. I'm not sure how they have programmed it. But then again, you wait all the way through spring, all the way to early summer, and then you will be able to harvest them, as far as I know it, in early summer here. And then you can start over or plant something else. And that's the rotational cycle that I do in Seasons. So if I have slurry or manure or digestate, I will always spray my fields before I do anything other with them. Other than that, it is just the way your fields turn out, whether you spray them with herbicide or you don't, or whatever you do. All right, so like I said, or actually, not like I said, but at least we saw it in one case here. Let's just summarize what has happened. So, in vanilla FS19, we would have had wheat, cotton, soybeans, and corn. Doesn't matter. In seasons, we have wheat. We don't have cotton because we planted outside of planting season, and also we planted below the germination temperature. We do have soybeans and we do have corn. Now, this might be a bug in the game. It may also be an artifact from the fact that I have set my seasons to 6 days. If it were 9 days, it might be that they wouldn't have germinated because there would be more days, more time before we got to the planting season. I'm not sure about that. That has to be further tested. But in any way, you can see here that, for instance, with cotton, even though we are at the right ground temperature and we are within the planting seasons, we didn't get anything. I think it's a bug that it didn't say germination failed, but just planted. It might be that they have reserved the germination failed for something else. I'm not sure about that. It might be one of the random parts. For instance, you also have to consider the temperatures that we have, the frost resistance and the drought resistance. So if you planted something and then you got frost or drought, then you would lose some of those. And of course, here we are talking about the seeds, right? So for instance, if we planted potatoes in a drought environment, then we will probably lose part of the crops, and that might also turn out like the germination failed on the map. But nevertheless, you can see here that if you plant cotton way out of planting season, you will not get any cotton. There is nothing here, but we did, however, get soybeans and corn. Regarding the rotation cycle here, you simply have to just play around with the different type of crops you have. For instance, soybeans, and then you can put in wheat. Then we can put in, let's put something like oilseed, and let's put something like cereal, corn, for instance, and then we can say fallow. So, for instance, here, if we plant soybeans as the first, that means that we have to wait until mid-spring. Well, actually, we don't, but it should be like that. Then we get a bonus, so 1.14, right? Then we plant wheat, then we get a bonus for 1.20. Then we plant sunflowers, then we get 1.20. And then we can plant corn, then we get 1.14. So we should get some bonuses, some fertilization bonuses by planting this rotation cycle here. So when you get to fallow, then you wait and then you start over. So that's the way you can do it. You could also put in something like barley, for instance, and then say fallow. Because barley, you can always plant that. As you can see, for instance, let's go to corn. We plant corn here, then we harvest it around here. And while we are in that harvest stage, we can afterwards plant wheat or barley or oat or whatever you want to do. So that is why you can put in barley like this, but it changes the numbers here. But this is the bonuses that you'll get. You can also plant something that will give you absolutely nothing. Wheat, 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 wheat. You can see you get 0.95, so it subtracts something from your ground. If you put in barley or oat, doesn't matter. If you put in canola, sunflowers, that will change. Because this is not a cereal. You can also see here you have cereal, oilseed, and all those things. So here we have legume, cereal, oilseed, cereal, and none. So that is the way you can plant these things. Let me see. So poplar, you could put that in. That is also a cereal, but that will... Let me see if you can get something that... Oh, well, yeah. No. You can also put in wheat, for instance, if you want to do that. So that's the way the rotation cycle program here works, or tool here works. It's a way for you to plan what you want to plant on your fields, and then you will get fertilization bonuses from planting that. I have no intentions of making this a tutorial on how to do Farming Simulator 19, FS19. But nevertheless, I wanted to give you sort of a quick rundown on what you can do and the equipment that I think you should use for that task. So let's take a look at it. So first and foremost, almost everything you do starts with you either plowing or cultivating your fields. Now, for plowing, and that is something you have to do at certain crops. I think it's sunflower and corn. After planting those, you need to plow over your fields in some way or the other. Now, there are two methods you can use for that. You can either use the ordinary moldboard plow like this big fella here. I think it's 12 meters or something like that. You can reach quite a big field with such a plow, but there are some things you need to consider. First and foremost, if you, like me, are just crazy with big butt, I think it's such, even though it's clearly an old design, squared and all that, I think it's a cool tractor. And so if you want to use big butt for that assignment, you need to have a little device, because big butt for some reason isn't equipped with a 3-point hitch, but most of the plows that you can buy in FS19 of these sorts here use 3-point hitches. Other than that, you would need to have an ordinary, if you will, tractor like this John Deere here, and then you can pull this plow around. This tractor here has plenty of horsepower for that assignment. The other option that you have, and you can use big butt for that without any modifications or any equipment between, that is this a subsoiler here. Now this is the big subsoiler. It is 8 meters wide, so it's a pretty big subsoiler. But obviously if you're playing on smaller fields like Ravenport or Felsbrunn or similar maps, you can get subsoilers in smaller ranges, 3 meters, 4 meters and thereabout. The difference between plows and subsoilers are that plows will only plow, so they will not cultivate your fields. Subsoilers will both plow your fields and cultivate them at the same time. So this is why I would recommend, for starters at least, that you get yourself a subsoiler of any size, depending on the kind of farm that you are. Obviously, for fields like on like these sizes here, you would definitely need this big this big subsoiler here. You would actually even need a bigger one. If you are keeping yourself to a certain range of crops, you don't need a plow just once. From there on about, you can go with a cultivator. Now, cultivators come in different kinds and different shapes and sizes, but in FS19 they do the same. So whether you choose a normal cultivator, if you choose a disc cultivator, or a power harrow, a disc harrow, or power harrow, or whatever you choose, they do the same thing, they cultivate. So this is what you need for starters. You can, like I said, spray your fields with solid or liquid fertilizer, with slurry or anything like that, but this is usually where you start. Then you can go over to the seeding. Now, for seeding, there are two kinds of seeders or implements in FS19. There are planters and seeders. Now, obviously in real life there's a huge difference between a planter and a seeder, but in FS19 the only real difference is the kind of crops that they can use, that they can plant. Now, this particular planter here can do a wide variety of crops. That means that it is both actually a seeder and a planter at the same time. So it can do both crops that seeders usually do and crops that planters usually do. But generally it is so that seeders can plant a certain kind of crops and planters can plant another certain kind of crop. Let me just show you real quick. Here we have the seeders. So let's take I really like this Amazon condor here. It is pretty big, 15 meters. So it is suitable for big fields. It can plant the following crops here. If I remember, it is wheat, barley, oat, canola, soybeans, oilseed radish, and grass. So this is the kind of crops that this machine here can plant. Also, other than that, it can also fertilize your fields at the same time. And obviously, they come in all different sizes, all the way from 3 meters to the really huge Seed Hawk, which is 20, I think this is the biggest one, 25.6 meters. And you need to add this cart here. So it is sort of a 2-hitch or whatever you want to call it. It's a double. There's both a seeder wagon and the seeder itself. The planters, well, they do things a little different. Let's take, for instance, the horse here. It is a little smaller, I think, than the other horse. Let's just take a look. This is 9 meters, so no, it's the same size. They are the same size. But as you can see, it can take corn, sunflower. It can also do soybean. It can do sugar beets. And I'm not sure, I think this is cotton. So as you can see, generally the planters and the seeders can do different crops. But this particular Great Plains, YP24 or 25A, it can do all these different crops. So you can both do corn, sunflower, soybeans, sugar beets, cotton, wheat, barley, oats, canola, oilseed radish, and grass. But these are generally the two different kind of options that you have for seeding. Now you need to consider how to fertilize your fields. Now, like I just showed you a little while ago, depending on how you plant your crops, if you rotate your crops in the correct manner, you will actually get a bonus so that you can skip certain fertilizing spreads. But generally, in FS19 and particularly in Seasons, you would need to fertilize your fields at every growth stage. You can do that. I do seem to recall that for Seasons you can only do it in the initial growth stages, but I haven't tested this very thoroughly, so I can't say exactly what is meant. For spreading fertilizers, you can also use slurry wagons, although I would recommend that if you want to do slurry, or you want to do manure or digestate, you do that either right before you have planted something, that can be even before you plow it or cultivate it, or just after you have planted. Because I seem to recall that there are neither the manure spreaders, the slurry wagons, or the manure spreaders can be equipped. Let me just take a relatively small one to see wheels enough. Yeah, you can only, you cannot, let me just show you. These particular set of wheels here are called care wheels. That means that you can drive around in your fields without hurting your crops. Now remember, as soon as your crops have sprouted, they are susceptible that if you drive over with a normal wheel like this, they will be destroyed. So there's crop destruction in FS19. So that is why I will suggest again that if you want to do slurry, manure, digestate, you do that before your crops sprout. After your crops are sprouted, you can there are several different methods you can choose. One of the things that you need to do is to spread lime. Now you only have to do this every third time. So it's sort of like the old plowing recommendation or requirements in FS17. You had to plow every third time. You don't have to do that anymore, but now you have to spread lime. Now for smaller fields, I would suggest, this is a mod, I know that, but I would suggest something like this, and you can find this in the mod hub on the game itself. This is a small spreader. It can spread both solid fertilizer and lime. The in-game version is this Bradal F2WS 4000. It holds 4000 liters. This holds 1000 liters, so this is quite bigger, but it cannot spread lime. So this is, if you want to have sort of a foolproof setup, you could use this for fertilizer and you could use this for lime. Although in my experience, you need to have a lot more lime to spread than you need fertilizer. To put it in another way, you would have to fill this small spreader here a lot more times with lime on the same field than you will need to do with solid fertilizer. So it's a trade-off what you want to do, but you do need something to spread lime. You can choose not to do it, but then you will lose a little bit of yield. I think it's 10%. So this is for solid fertilizer and lime. For liquid fertilizer, you have spreaders like this. Now this is obviously a spreader for a big field. As you can see, I think it's 43 meters wide, so it's a pretty big machine. It holds a lot of liquid fertilizer and also herbicide. So these can spread both herbicide and liquid fertilizer. In FS19, in vanilla FS19 without seasons, I would recommend that you do the following. Spray your fields with slurry, manure or digestate before you plant anything. Preferably you would then plant using a seeder, there it is, that can fertilize at the same time. Then you run your fields over with a spreader like this, liquid spreader with herbicide. And if you need it, then finally you run your fields over with a set or spread of liquid fertilizer as the last step. You can do all of these in one consecutive run, so you are finished with that. And I have tested it quite a bit now, and in my experience, it's clearly working, so you won't get any weeds in your fields. But for seasons, it's a bit different. First and foremost, I have tested it a bit now, and it seems that you cannot do the same trick. I cannot get the fields to respond. Usually the fields will change color, the soil will change color when you run it over with herbicide or fertilizer. It will grow darker with fertilizer and grow lighter with herbicide. You can test that for yourself in vanilla FS19. I cannot get it to do that in seasons, so I tend to think that has been turned off. What you can do instead is that you can fertilize your fields with every growth stage, and then you can sort of selectively spray herbicide on your fields if you want to, but you should also be able to preemptively spread it. So obviously this machine here is for big fields, And the final little thing that I want to show you, this is for spreading also solid fertilizer or lime. But this is for big fields. It has a lot wider spread and it holds a lot more content. I think it's 18,000 liters or something like that it can hold, so quite a bit more. These are, as far as I know it, the general steps that you need to do in order to take care of your fields. Now for the part that I really wanted to go into in the last part of this video. So when your fields are ready, when they have sprouted, when you can harvest them, and I'm going to show you that when we fast forward time in a little bit, there are different methods that you can use for different crops depending on whether you want to sell your crops or you want to have animals. Now obviously you're not limited to one or the other, although of course you can only harvest one field one time. So for a single harvest you need to choose between the following two. If you want to harvest for selling your crops, then you can use a normal harvester like this, and again they come in different sizes. This variant here, the Agro Ideal Massive Ferguson 90, is obviously for big fields. Likewise, we have 3 different headers for these kind of harvests. So this header here is your general header for corn and sunflower. This header here can do both. Let me just show you. You're going to corn headers, and this is the kind I have here, the Quasar HS16. It can do corn and sunflower. So if you're planning on doing both corn and sunflower, you can choose a header like this, and then you're set to go for these 2 crops. If you're only considering sunflower, then you can get a dedicated sunflower header like this. Again, it's a Capella. So let's just take a look. I think it's in here. And there. Capella, yeah. Helianthus 12,000. It can do sunflower only. Now, I have been told that the only real difference between these 2 headers here are the fact that this header here can handle sunflowers a little bit faster than this one here. I have also been told, but I haven't tested it, that this header here should provide you a little more yield. But like I said, I haven't tested that. This header here, for instance, also can be folded. These 2 cannot. This one cannot. So if you want to drive around with this on the road, you would most likely need a header trailer. The final header, the standard header for your harvester, and probably the first header you will ever start with, is the general rotary, or whatever you want to call it, header here. It takes all the other crops that you can find in FS 19. And it is also the same in the vanilla game, so there's no real difference here. These headers here are useful for if you either want to sell your crops or if you want to have piggies, because piggies need different kind of crops, particularly in seasons. They need actually all the crops that you can get with these 2 headers here, either these 2 here or this one and this one here. So the normal header and one of these 2 here. Then you can get all the crops that you need to feed your piggies, including straw. If you want to have cows instead, there are different methods that you can use, because then you would need silage. And the best way to get silage, in bulk at least, that is using a forage harvester like this. Now there are several ways you can run a forage harvester like this. The only real difference that you need to be aware of is that a forage harvester has no internal storage. So the acro harvester here, the normal harvester, it obviously have an internal storage, so you can run it and then you can empty it somewhere and then you can let it run again and then you can empty it, so on, so on, so on. A forage harvester needs to be emptied as it goes. So you can do two things, one or two things. You can do, as I have done here, attach a couple of trailers. Then you can run the harvester with those trailers, and the pipe here will automatically select the trailer that is available, whether it chooses the rear one or the forward one. I think it usually chooses the forward one, and when that is filled up, it will go to the next one. But generally, the pipe here will automatically select the first trailer that it can find that is empty, or at least isn't filled with chaff, so that it can fill it up. So yeah, that is what I would say the things that you need to consider. And the general idea here is applicable both for vanilla farming simulator, but of course also for Seaons farming simulator. All right, so the plan for now is that I will once again fast forward time until we get to all of these crops, obviously not cotton, but all of these crops when they are ready to be harvested. And then I will show you first and foremost the difference between the forage harvester and the normal harvester, and also the difference between the headers. Obviously we don't have sunflowers, so we don't really need the sunflower header, but obviously we need this header here for the wheat, and we need the sunflower and corn header for the corn over here, and we also need the normal header for the soybeans here. And we can run, that's one of the things that I forgot to mention, this header here is, as far as I know it, comparable to this header over here. Let me just check. So it's forest harvesters. There it is. So it can only do corn. So it's a corn header alone. And the other header here can do, it's for the big, yes, that's the one. It can do all of these. So sunflowers you cannot get, but you can do it with wheat, barley, oat, canola, and soybeans. So as far as I remember, yes, that is what we have here. So that should be available to us. But this is for corn alone, which we have here. And as far as I know it, corn is the best crop for forage harvesting. One other thing, I have been told that you should be able to harvest something like corn, for instance, with a forage harvester before it is completely grown. So let's try that. Alright, so let's just open the trailers. And that's unfold. And get the pipe out. So as you can see, the pipe will automatically aim at the available. Like that. Oh. Let's see what happens. No. That didn't work. Maybe I would think that that is something... Okay. I would think that that is something they have changed in Seasons, because you should be able to harvest them before they're fully grown. Perhaps it is in the final stage, but before harvest ready. But let's fast forward time and see when we are ready to harvest. So as you can see, the wheat is now ready to harvest, but one other strange thing happened. We have now got cotton growing. And this leads me to believe that this must be some kind of bug in Seasons 19, because these crops here should definitely have been died out for now. Our soybeans are still growing and the corn are still growing. Let's check and just see the growth states. Should be the final growing state before they are ready to harvest. So let's see if we can get them with the what was its name? The forage harvester. Now, let's see. Yeah, now we can. As you can see, the forage harvester is filling up the wagon. Let me just show you what happens. We just back them out and then release them. And now you should see that when I get too far away from... See, nothing happens. It can store a little bit, and as I get closer it will spew it out, but at some point it will stop filling the wagons up. It will stop. See if I can capture the... There we go. I'm going to leave some of them behind so that we also have some. But this is a great way for making silage, chaff, and as you probably know, there's two ways general that you can get silage from chaff. In reality, I would say in vanilla FS or without any kind of mods, there's really only one way that you can get silage from chaff, and that is by using a clamp silo. So if we go into silos, then you can see we have a small bunker silo here. Then you place that at some point, I won't do it here, but you place that, and then you fill up that bunker with your chaff, and then you run it over with a tractor or anything like that. There is a tool actually now that wasn't in FS in 17 that we have now. Levelers, yeah, there it is. Sorry, this is the Holaris Stego 485. You can use that to compact your heaps, your silage. And also we have these levelers here. You can use that to level out your sort of spread out your what you have in your silos. I might make another video on how to make silage from clamp silos, but if you're not afraid of looking for mods, like I've shown you in the first video I did on 3 different mods, or actually it's the same, that I found that I think is excellent for that kind of... Just go to the map. Yeah, let's just go to this one. So this is the fermenting plant here. You can put in either grass or you can put in chaff. And when you put that in, then you get silage in the other end. Obviously, it's going to take some time. Now, the reason why I would like to make a video about how to use the clamp silos, or for that matter, the balers, is that you actually have to wait, like I said, 1/3 of the time, 1/3 of a season, in order to get your silage. So this is also different from vanilla FS19, where you got your silage right away. Now let me just show you that I cannot do this. I should not be able to do the same thing with this header here, because the corn are not harvest ready yet. Let me just unfold the harvester and let's get going. You see, they only bent them down. We don't get anything. Let me just show you another thing. Let's take the forage harvester here and let me show you that you can also get forage. You don't get as much, but you can also get forage from the wheat that we had. Also, you can fold this header here, the forage header here, you can fold that together. You can't do that with the other, as far as I know. If I can. I couldn't avoid hitting it. Alright. So I'm going to leave the chaff in the wagons here, because then I can use it in the other video. Let me just show you what I told you before. Let me see. If I run over, I should lose part of the crops. Yeah, as you can see. I know. Doesn't seem that I do. Maybe they are not grown enough yet. Or maybe cotton is just really tough. I'm not sure. So let's start up the harvester and let's get a row of... And as you can see, we get chaff again. So chaff is basically just that you take all the crops that you harvest and then chop it up in smaller parts, so everything gets chopped up, and then you can use that for making silage. Going to cover it up. Oh, there were more. Alright. There we were. And obviously, if I take the harvester here and put on the normal header, then I can harvest some more. Now, I will leave a little bit of the fields intact, because I will also like to test with you right here, right now, how long it will take before the crops begin to wither. So we have to keep a little bit of of every kind of crop, but let's just deal with the... And now we should get some straw. Yep, there's a pile of straw, and you can pick that up or you can bale it, whatever you want to do. That's up to you. All right. Now we got a little bit of wheat. So this you can put in a silo, and then you can sell it at some point. And that's the other. Or you can give it to your pigs. I'm pretty sure that they can take wheat as well. We can just go and check. Now we're at it. Just see. One other thing that you might have noticed is that it has told me quite a bit of time when I fast forwarded the time that some of my animals has died. That is another difference between Seasons and vanilla FS19, that your animals can actually die. As you can see here, they have certain health, and when that health goes to 0, the animals will die. Now, obviously, I'm not too concerned with that right now because this is not a play farm, this is a test farm. But I'm going to show you more in depth what you can do and what you should be aware of when you have animals in FS19. And that goes for all the animals. There's a bit difference with the horses, but I'm going to show you that in another video. But as you can see here, in order to feed your pigs, you can give them corn. That gives you an effectiveness of 50%. You can give them either wheat or barley. That gives them an additional 25% effectiveness. And you can either give them soybeans or canola or sunflower, and then gives you the last 25% effectiveness. So, like I said, this is not going to be a video about animals, but as you can see here, one of the main differences between vanilla FS 19 and Seasons 19, at least for the piggies, is that you don't have to feed them sugar beets or potatoes anymore. You can simply go with corn, wheat, barley, soybeans, canola, sunflower. That means, like I said, that everything you can harvest with either the normal header or the this header here, or for that matter, this header here, you can go with that. All right. So now I've shown you a little bit about what we can do with the different kinds of harvests. And the final thing I want to show you is, first and foremost, what happens when the crops die out, when they wither. How long does that take? And also, let's go into a little bit about what we can do with cotton, because obviously that's a different kind of crop. But I think that might be for another video, perhaps. And also, cotton is really more an vanilla FS tutorial than it is specific for Seasons. But let's fast forward time once again, and I'm going to speed up the video as well, so you don't have to wait as long as I have. You're fortunate. See you in a bit. So we are now in late summer, and as you can see, for some strange reason, the cotton is growing. It shouldn't be, but nevertheless, we also have our soybeans. They are still growing. And now our corn is ready to be harvested, but unfortunately they are wet, so we cannot harvest them yet. So I'm going to fast forward time again, and then I'm going to show you how to harvest the corn when they are ready to be harvested. So see you then. So as you can see, I just want to show you that the wheat we have gone through one transition. The wheat hasn't withered yet. And also I want to show you some other thing that comes with seasons. If you go into tools and then go to MISC or miscellaneous, you have the MT9 here. I have mentioned it before. You can buy that, and then you can go into your field like this and then take a measurement. It will tell you the position on the map, your altitude in meters or feet, that it is corn, the crops that you have. They should be 67% grown. They are ready to harvest. They are 36% wet, so that's quite a bit. 100% fertilized, and the ground moisture is 44%. This is important in relation to drought. But the number I wanted to get your attention on is this number here. This tells you whether you can harvest your crops or not. You also have the icon up here in the top. But that icon only tells you when your crops are too wet to be harvested and when they are not. So that's the real difference here. Whereas the MT9 will give you information about the different crops that you have. So for instance, this one here, let's take it, the soybeans. They are 50% grown. Let's just go take a look at the cotton. 33% grown. And the wheat is 100%. So that's just the way it should be to harvest it. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to show you right now. Yes, other thing that you can see here. First and foremost, we have a little bit of weeds here. Other than that, you can look down below here and see that our field here both needs lime, but it also needs plowing. Now, for instance, if we go to the field where we harvested the wheat, it only needs lime. So like I said, you only need to plow when you have planted certain crops, and when you harvest them, then you need to run over with the plow. Of course, you can use the subsoiler also. But let's advance time once again and see how our wheat will do in early autumn. So now, just like I said, the corn is ready to be harvested. So let's take the harvester here. Let's get rid of this header. Now we need to dump the wheat out in the silo. I suppose I have... Yes, I have placed a silo, because otherwise it would be a real short introduction. Let's just extend the pipe. This is also one of those little bit funny things. You can actually dump your crops directly from the pipe to the silo. Let me just show you. Oh. There we go. So let's go and get harvested some of these corn here. And once again, I'm going to leave some of them behind in order to show you when they will wither, and also perhaps even when you can get frost damage to some of your crops. A little bit early. Let's... Oh, they are not ready yet? Oh, really? Okay. I thought they were. Well, then we just wait. Let me just go check. No, they're still growing. Yeah, okay. They look ready, but obviously they weren't. So I'm going to fast forward time once again. So we are now in early autumn. We still have our wheat. It's still ready to harvest. It hasn't withered yet. Our cotton is now ready to harvest. Our soybeans are now ready to harvest. And the corn is now ready to harvest. So let's take a look at what we can do, and let's do with cotton as well. So let's harvest a little bit of corn. As you can see, the yield of corn is not that great, so it's very, very little that we get, but you can sell it for quite a bit. So I think it evens it out in the end, but the yield is definitely not great. All right. So we have harvested some corn. Let's put over the corn header at its place somewhere. I'm not sure I have a particular place for this corn header. I don't. Let's go dump off the corn. I'm going to pause the video while I do that. And also, just like with the wheat, we should also be able to get chaff from, yes, the soybeans here. Now, getting chaff from soybeans, I'm not sure that's such a great idea, because you don't get a relatively high yield compared to what you would get harvesting them ordinarily. Again, as far as I know, the single most greatest way for getting chaff with a forage harvester is harvesting corn using the corn header. That gives you, as far as I know, the single most yield. But once also we can use the normal header over here for the tractor and harvest some of the soybeans. So let's do that. As you can see, it gives a bit more yield, and also you can sell soybeans for quite a bit. So I would certainly say that it is more feasible to harvest the soybeans ordinarily and then sell them, other than using them for chaff. So the final thing I want to show you before we try to fast forward time once again and see when our crops will wither, because as far as I remember, as I think it should be, you should be able to have your crops in this stage for a lot longer time, far more days than you should be able to have it in vanilla FS19. But let's see exactly when our different crops are going to wither out. But I'm going to get some cotton harvesters and some equipment for that, and then I'm going to meet you back here. So be right back. So I just went and bought some equipment that you need in order to do cotton. Now, first and foremost, I would like to say that I would suggest, highly recommend, that you only do cotton when you have big fields. So it's a map like this, Midwest Horizon. It can be any kind of map that has really big fields. Can also be the Michigan map. You might be able to do cotton on some of the the bigger fields in Ravenport, but other than that, I would say it's not feasible to do cotton if you only have small fields, because you would at least need a lot of fields in order to make any real money. And also the starting equipment. Let me just show you. You need the cotton harvester. It is $485,000. That's pretty much compared to the other harvesters. You will also need either this smaller module here that can hold one cotton bale, or you can have the big module here, the big trailer here that I have chosen, which is you need a truck or a dolly in order to drive that. This one you can use just an ordinary tractor to drive around. You need at least one of these two. So that is 484,000. That is a little above 500,000 just to get started. So that's a pretty big loan you need to take out, or you need to make some money. And let me just show you the capacity. Now I have installed a mod so I can choose the capacity for the bale, so I can go all the way up to 20,000 liters. I'm going to run with 1,500 this time in order to be able to perhaps produce a bale, so you can see how it looks. So let's expand it. When it is expanded, I think it looks a bit silly, but that's how it looks. And let's start it up and get some cotton. Now, just like with the ordinary baler, it will spit out a bale whenever it is ready for it. I'm not sure you can spit out a bale when you are not fully loaded, but as you can see, it takes a great amount of cotton to produce one bale, and you sell them 2 bales at a time, right? So you need to have big fields in order for this to be usable for you. But if I'm not mistaken, as you can see, it will leave the cotton heads alone, so there might grow new cotton on the if they don't die of frost, that is, on the stalks. Let us see if we can even produce one bale when I've set it to 1,500 liters. We should be able to do that. Yep, there we are. So let me see. Unload. Let's just go and see whether... Let's see what it says here. It says harvested. So I guess you need to sow it again. Let me see if... Yeah, it can. 1,500 liters of cotton. So what you need to do next is to take your truck here. And then drive it up to your... Let me see if I will destroy it. Yes, I will. It was B. Yeah. Let's see if I can back up the... I could. There it was. And now it scoops it in. There you are. Then let's take it down. And then you can drive this bale of cotton to a selling point. And then you can sell it. So that's the way you deal with cotton. But as you can see, first and foremost, let's take a look at the prices. So cotton is this one here. In mid-cut, you can get it for 2,013. That is per 1,000 liters. So let me just get a calculator and let's see. 2013 divided by 1,000, that is 2.013, and let's multiply that with 1,500. So for that bale alone, we get 3,019. Now obviously I could have chosen a 20,000 liter bale, but then I wouldn't be able to make it. So as you can see, you need really huge fields in order to get enough cotton to make any money with that. All right, so let's fast forward time. Now I've shown you, in my opinion, anything you need to, or everything you need to know in order to harvest fields, basically also in vanilla FS 19, but definitely using Seaons. So let's take the final look at what happens when we fast forward time. When will our crops wither, and will we have frost damage when we enter winter? So I will unpause the video at every new transition, so that will be in mid-autumn the next time, late autumn, and then in early winter, midwinter, and late winter. And then we will enter spring, and I will end the video, and then we will sum up what has happened. So let's go forward for now. We are now in mid-autumn. None of our crops, as far as I can see it, has withered yet. Let me see. The soybeans are still ready to harvest. The corn is still ready to be harvested. And the cotton that we have here is still ready to be harvested. So as you can see, we have quite a bit of time in order to harvest our fields. So even though they get wet at some points, you still have time to wait it out and harvest them at a later point. Let's just quickly check the Seasons menu. So all the crops that we have in now should, if this is correct, if it is not dependent on the time itself, we should be able to have our crops ready to be harvested and not withered, all the way up to early winter. One other thing that I would like to have you notice, it's a little thing, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. Notice how the cloud pattern change, and they change direction and also speed. This is something that has come with seasons. Also notice how the sun, the day of the length of the day, changes depending on the season. That is obviously also seasons. And finally, even though I'm speeding up the video, try to notice how the noise from the wind change whenever the speed of the wind picks up or slows down. So yeah, try to do that, and then we will see each other again in late autumn. Now we are in late autumn, and as you can see, our wheat is still here. Our cotton is still here. Our soybeans, they are still here, ready to harvest. And our corn is ready to harvest. Also, while you were away, I planted some sunflowers and some barley in order to show you what will happen with the different crops when we plant them, also out of season, but just as much when we're going towards winter. But let's continue and see how it goes for our crops in early winter. See you then. Oh yes, one other thing that I would like for you to notice how the leaves on the trees have changed color, but also if you go a little bit back in this video, notice how the amount of leaves on the trees also have changed. This is something that is different from season 17 to 19. Please notice that, and let's go on to winter now. We are now in early winter, and once again our crops are still here, ready to be harvested, but notice that the air temperature has gone very low. It is -2 degrees. The soil temperature has also gone relatively low. It's not frozen yet, but it is getting there. But still, we still have the rest of our crops. They are ready to be harvested. They haven't withered yet. And also, the sunflowers here have germinated. For some reason they shouldn't have. But our barley, for that matter, is growing. And I'm not sure it should that, but yeah, it should. But let's see how it survives the rest of winter. I'll see you again in midwinter. It is now midwinter, and as you can see, we have now for the first time in this run through here gotten frost, a ground frost. Also, as you can see, now our wheat has withered just as we expected. Also, our cotton has withered just like we expected. Our soybeans has withered just like we expected. And our corn has withered just like we expected. Also, our sunflowers that we planted before winter is now represented as harvested, which definitely means that they are no longer, they are dead. We cannot do anything with them, but our barley is still here. All right, now I'm going to stand here and let's move forward to late winter and see what happens. And we are now in late winter. Still no snow, which is a bit disappointing, but as you can see, nothing has changed. The crops that we had before are withered, the sunflowers didn't become anything, and our barley is still growing. So let's continue to spring and then end this relatively long video. So see you there. It is now 8 o'clock on the first day of early spring. We have now gone through an entire year in seasons, and as you can see just now, our barley, they grew a bit because they are now in a condition where they can grow once again, because we are in the green area for barley. Even though the soil temperature is too low, they have germinated, so they will grow now. And they will be ready to harvest somewhere around early summer. I hope that this video has first and foremost helped you to understand how you should harvest your fields, what you should do, what you shouldn't do when you're running seasons. But what I really wanted you to see, the most important thing in my mind actually, was to show you that seasons give you something very valuable that vanilla FS19 doesn't. Predictability. You can predict quite accurately if you follow the plan, if you follow the calendar, when your crops are ready to harvest, and more importantly, when they will wither. Because they will not wither, as far as I know, as we have tested right here, right now, before you end the harvest season. Of course, there are much more to seasons than this. There are much more to FS19 than this. In seasons, there's also snow, and there's crop damage from frost and all those things. We did get ground frost, and that is probably maybe what damaged the sunflowers, because they are very, let me just show you. Sunflowers are very susceptible to frost resistance, even when they are seeds. So this is what I want to show you in this video. In the next couple of videos, I'll look into how you do harvest your straw and grass, how you can dry it to hay, how you make silage bales, how you make silage in the clam silo, and also using that mod that I have found, and I will try to remember to put the link in the description so you can find it for yourself and use it. There are different ways you can do this. I prefer the not the clam silo but the real silo because it gives you a steady amount of silage, and also you don't have to compact it. It's not that difficult to do, I'll show you that, but it is some work that you need to consider. Other than that, as always, if you like my videos, then give it a thumbs up, and if you want to follow me and want to see what I do in the future, then subscribe to my channel and click that little bell button so you get notifications whenever I make a new video. Other than that, there's nothing else to say than see you in the next video. Bye bye.